and welcome to the Tech Show. Coming up this week, we take a look at that Ibis, Ripley and the Ripmo.
And we've got taming tech from Knolly.
And YT return to their roots, or should we say the dirt, for the dirt jump bike.
We've got a living link bike from Spot Bicycles.
And Specialized bring back the Status, a classic aluminium trail bike.
And another classic is a new tyre from Maxxis, or is it an old one that's been refreshed? Okay, race on Sunday, sell on Monday. It's a great mantra. Originally, it's, I think, from NASCAR, but it could easily apply to, well, downhill racing. I mean, cross-country bikes, I feel like you'd have one at the start of the year and it'd be sort of same. And I guess this sort of loops to, you know, are these rapid prototype bikes, all these prototype bikes that we're starting to see, is it an unfair advantage for other racers? We've seen, you know, prototype bikes from, well, most recently Specialized that seem to have given big advantages in terms of suspension and electronic tech, and we're seeing Canyon as well develop bikes. So yeah, is it an unfair advantage?
I mean, some people, again, some of the top racers, I mean, Loic Bruni, Finn Isles, they're all on prototype bikes, but it's only an unfair advantage if, well, they're getting an advantage. Like, some people aren't getting an advantage by being on a prototype. Like Bernard Kerr, for example, was on that prototype pivot. A couple of times he's been beaten by teammates that were on bikes that were the standard stock that you can buy, not the prototype. And there was that incident back in March where his prototype snapped on the course as well, which is kind of the risk that you run. And I've sort of got a bit of an issue with tying in prototypes with fast riders and saying it's an advantage, because I feel like, are they fast because they're on a prototype, or are they getting prototypes because they are the fastest riders and they need to test it?
That's very valid. I think that we saw or heard rumours of inter-team rivalry last year. So last year, the Specialized Gravity team had got, one rider had got prototype electronic Olin suspension that they got like a thumb button to change. Yeah, and another rider didn't have that, and apparently they were, inter-team kind of
But there's got to be
rivalry.
An element of strategy and head game here. I mean, there was speculation around Loic having those caliper brake covers. Like, was that head game that trying to make everyone think that they needed them? I mean, we see that, you know, often riders are at the peak, you know, they're at the same, similar physical level, similar skill level, and they say that the race is won and lost before you even start. It's all in the head, effectively.
You see, normally I'd agree with you, but this year I think it's an exception in terms of, we've seen the Specialized bike and then there were two electronic Specialized, for want of a better word, in terms of this suspension. But now we've had three new Canyons, because Sane is like, not suddenly, she's always been incredible, but she feels like she's raised to another level this year, new bike. But then also, you've got Troy and Luca as well on this new bike, but they've had this prototype DH flight attendant system. And it definitely feels like they've, on certain tracks where the advantages of you know, semi-active suspension, electronic active suspension, has been a really big advantage in terms of Fort William, where, you know, it's not necessarily a cohesive track, and then Leogang, where it's got really technical sections and then a sort of flatter, jumpy bit, and then a mega technical section. So it feels like on those tracks that they've had a big advantage over some of the more
It's still hard to pick
normal
apart though, isn't it? Because RockShox giving flight attendant to the best riders in the world, and therefore it's showing it off. But I do think suspension is one of those things that do genuinely give you an advantage. And if they are genuinely getting an advantage from suspension, then obviously the prototypes are helping. I mean, we saw the speed suits recently as well. And okay, that's not tech as such, but we know that speed suits and skin suits give you an unfair advantage. So if you're not in it, you are actually losing seconds or milliseconds. But going back to bike prototype tech, I kind of think, yes, all the best riders in the world are on it, but if we were to actually isolate the bikes alone and look at 2023 most fast fastest, winningest bike. Actually, the top 3 I don't think are prototypes. So we had the Commensal Supreme, we had the Trek Session. Maybe they were mucking around with the idler position, but it was a standard bike per se. And then also the Santa Cruz V10. Granted, it was the V10.8, but that was released in November last year. So it was effectively a pre-production, not a prototype. So in that respect, they're obviously not an advantage, are they? Because otherwise they'd win more.
Well, they've won quite a lot this year, but it's a really good point. I guess it flags that, well, we should say that downhill prototypes are not new. They've been around since Nico's LTSDH. He had like Sun bikes that were radically prototype. They were just designed for one person. So it's not new, but it feels like this year there's been an extra impetus where it is different. And I mean, I guess the big thing is like, what do you think? Is it an advantage? Do you think there should be like a timeline on how long these prototype bikes can be there? Can they be a production bike? Does it have to be based on a production bike? Do
you even care that people are on prototypes and you may not ever see them come to light?
See,
I'm not bothered.
No, but that's it's a really good point, because I think for me, if you look at Honda, okay, it had little wheels, but it was so ahead of the curve in terms of like its drivetrain hidden in a box, the suspension system, the high pivot, all of it was ultra forward thinking. And now we're only getting kind of like race bikes and trail bikes with those high pivots and those idlers now. And Honda, brief story, they came in, they used it as a development program for a year or 2 years, maybe 3. Each rider had their own bike. They were super cutting edge. And then Honda went, yeah, cool. I think we're finished now, we've learnt lots. And so we missed out on all these incredible prototype bikes, and now we're only just catching up now. So that's my argument against prototype. But yeah, what do you think? Yes for prototypes, should there be a timeline? Let us know. And don't forget, you can watch all the Whoop UCI Mountain Bike World Cup on Discovery Plus, or Max, if applicable.
So Ibis have refreshed the Ripley and the Ripmo with some big changes, actually. Let me go through some of the headliners first. So with the Ripley, it's a 130 rear wheel travel bike, and it comes stock with 140mm forks, but you can actually make it compatible with anything from 130 to 150mm forks. And it has a flip chip so that you can change the rear wheel from 29 to 27.5 if you want a mixed wheel setup, which I think is just absolutely essential in trail bikes these days. It's got built-in frame storage, it's sticking with the DW Link suspension, 5 sizes, now roughly 64.9 degree head angle in here, but I should say that the big news is that now they're having proportional geometry for the different sizes. So they're actually tuning things like the seat tube angle, the top tube length, the reach, the bottom bracket height, and everything else to make it more of a balanced ride across all of the sizes and not just scaled down. And that should be from $4,999 US, and that would be complete with Dior, or frame only from $3,499. And the Ripmo is similar, changes have been made. Now this is the bigger travelled big brother, I guess you could say, with 150 in the rear, 160 up front. Again, flip chip for mixed wheels and 29 changes, and also slacker head angle, and also that sort of size specific geometry and frame storage. And one more thing with that Ripmo is they actually made the rear suspension slightly more progressive, which even if you don't care, it does actually make it more compatible with a coil shock, and they've even shortened the clevis so that you can fit more, well, pretty much every coil shock on the market should be able to fit that now. And again, that is from $4,999 US.
Knolly have got a new gnar taming bike, the Derelium.
No.
Oh, Jesus!
What the heck?
I can't say the word. Delirium. I know, it's a hard word to say, especially if you mean it. It's a new bike from Knolly. It's a gnar taming bike. It was one of the original winch and plummet bikes. I think the first one had 160mm of travel and had a really steep seat angle, really steep. Then it kind of got one update and kind of grew a little bit of travel. I think it went up to kind of like 170. It's now grown even more to become a 190mm travel bike, which quote unquote is one that I must have missed, is the MX Freeride Park bike, which I don't think I've ever said before. Effectively, Knolly is saying it's not a downhill bike, but as close as you can get. So 190mm rear travel, you can put a dual crown on it, 29 a dual crown, so it is MX wheel size. It has got that straight seat tube, which originally was designed pre-dropper, so you can put a really long dropper in it, up to 200 or 220 in some models, depending on which size you go for. It's got Knolly's classic 4x4 suspension, so that's got this sort of extra swing link to work around the straight seat tube. Tailored for downhill performance and traction, but is pedalable. I mean, yeah, bold bike to be pedaling up hills. Full enduro bearings, which is a bit of a change. 63-degree head angle in the steepest, 62.25 in the slack, which is slacker than some production downhill bikes. Available in 4 sizes with a reach from 4.57 in the smallest to 5.31 in the largest. Frame only with the rear shock DHX2 from $3,199 US or 4,299 Canadian dollars. Big bike, lots of travel.
Well, speaking of new old bikes returning, Specialized are bringing back the Status with the Status 2. Although I'm looking at it and it's given me nostalgia of mid-noughties, mid-2010s anyway on the Specialized. Now, this is their aluminium trail bike, and depending on where you are in the country, depends on what sort of models are going to be available for you. But in the US, you get in all 3 models, so you get either a 140 trail bike with the Status 140, or you get a 170 Burley trail bike with the Status 170, and you can also get the 170 Park DH bike called the Status DH. Now here in the UK we're only going to be seeing the Status 170 and the Status DH, but I think that suits the UK quite well to have a Burley aluminium trail bike. So all 3 models will obviously be alloy only, and they will have a mixed wheel setup, 29, 27.5 only as well. You will get 5 sizes in the standard trail bikes, the 140 and the 170, but the downhill will only be coming in 4 sizes, and they'll be using their Specialized size range, which is S1 through to S5, which is effectively them using the reach in order to size their bikes rather than giving you a small, medium or large. So just to give you an idea on price, the 170 is coming with, for example, the Fox 38 fork and a DHX shock with Dior drivetrain and TRP brakes for £3,000, which isn't too bad. I think that's quite a decent price for an alloy trail bike. And each of those are coming with flip chips on the chainstays for some chainstay adjustments, which I wouldn't expect on that bike, but that is a welcome addition.
Yeah, and in other parts of the world, there is going to be a 0 in the 140 and the 170. It gets a bit confusing in terms of how many models there are, and it's just Status 2. But essentially, it's like a kid's... No, it's not. Sorry, I was going to say it's a kid's bike, but that's wrong. It's for rippers who are under 5 foot. Very specific about that. So
I'm 1 inch over, so I can't rip that.
I'm sorry, you can't rip it. But mixed wheel size of 275 at front and 26 in the back. Yeah, but not available in the UK, sadly. Sad times. YT are getting airborne again. So YT many moons ago had a dirt jump bike. That's how they started, and they've gone back to their roots. And this is an all-new aluminium frame, hydroformed. It looks very cool. As a true dirt jump bike, it's very tight in geometry. It's also single speed. It's got adjustable sort of rear chainstay length, so you can tension the chain. It's actually available in 2 sizes, which makes a change. So heights from 150 up to 200 centimeters. So pretty good size range. And you've got 2 models. You've got the Core 2, which is from €1,399 and pounds and dollars, all interchangeable. The cheaper Core 1 comes in at €1,000, £1,000 or $1,000. It is available as a frame set as well, which is quite nice, for only €500 or £500 or $500. Yeah, the difference I can see is relatively subtle between the 2 models. So one's got a Mazzocchi fork and one's got a Manitou. But yeah, it seems well timed for summer, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere.
Nice. Something a little unusual now, not a brand we often hear about, but Spot Bikes have just released a new trail bike called the Mayhem. Now it's a 140 reel trail bike, but it's a little unusual, and well, to be honest, I'm not sure I can explain this, Owen. What the heck is a living link, and why does it have it?
Well, Spot have been using this for a while, since about 2015, and effectively it's instead of having a fixed link, so think of a twin link bike where you've got two fixed points and it creates a virtual pivot somewhere.
Because they rotate in directions and the wheel kind of has a curve. Yeah.
So with this, effectively you've got a fixed link, and then the second lower link is actually, it's got a leaf spring in it. Okay. So it's a little carbon plate. They've used it for a while. It's really broad. So it's not pivoting or flexing that way, but it's flexing, in just one plane.
Okay.
And it means that it changes the kinematics because effectively it's moving under loads and at different loads. So it's really quite clever in terms of how it's moving and how it's working.
And is this in any way similar to like a flex seat stay at all in a sort of linkage-driven single pivot, or?
So. Yes, but no.
Yeah, I expected that answer.
So it is, but because it is actually arcing, whereas lots of those sort of like, it's arcing and it's got pivots. So unlike those flex stays where it is just acting as a long link and a long pivot and moving a little bit, this is moving quite a lot and in a certain way and under certain loads, so it will react differently.
Cool. Well, I mean, it looks like a really nice bike. It's 140 in the rear, 150 up front, but it can take a 160 fork. It's modern trail geometry as we'd expect, 65.5 degree head angle, reaches 415 up to 505, so some nice big size range in there. And we're looking at a 4-star build of £4,595. This is with a Lyric fork and sort of a super deluxe shock and GX Eagle build. Or you can get it frame only for £2,902. For a carbon frame, that's not so bad really, I think, especially for a new concept.
Yeah, I think it's good. Okay, new from Maxxis, an icon gets remade and reborn. It's very good.
There's
a new high roller.
A new one. So what is this, a high roller 3?
They're just calling it the high roller, which I think is quite good, to be fair, because otherwise it gets overly confusing. I mean, it was one of the kind of like first must-have tyres from Maxxis, because Maxxis made tyres before that and before the Minion. And I guess like it was inspired by French tyres of a similar time frame, but it was probably one of the first big tyres that everybody ran was a high roller. They were super popular.
Very popular.
And with this third iteration, they've gone back to their racing roots to develop the new tyre. It's designed to cover a really broad range of terrains and sort of like, I guess, softness of terrain, so soil types, whether it be mud or bog or sand, etc.
Lots of options then.
Exactly, or just one option. So it's meant to fit between the Assegai and the Shorty, so sort of be an all-rounder, which is quite nice, really. Initially, it's only going to be available in the 2.4 full-fat Maxxis Max Grip soft compound DH casing, 275 and 29er, but lighter options of the Enduro DD and the Trail XO casing will be coming. DH casing is from effectively 75 quid and the Enduro casing will be around 80 quid. But related to what we were saying about prototype parts, here's a good one, because this is a brand new tyre, but it's already got a race win at Mount St Anne. We haven't even been to Mount St Anne. It won last year's.
Well, there you go. We get it tested there before we get the goodness.
But we got it, so that's, I guess we're, interesting. Right, quiz time. Last week, we asked what state was Kona originally from? And it was a bit of a misleading question, I'll give you that, because...
Trick question.
Yeah, I know, I'm being kind of cheeky. So they've always been Pacific Northwest based, but it was founded in Vancouver, but is now based in Ferndale, Washington. And it was kind of like, that's when the business was first done, is in Ferndale, but as a business there, the idea in BC.
Shall we give a pride point to everyone who mentioned both then, maybe?
I think that's very good. That's very honest,
So winners are on the screen now. And what is our next question?
It's a good one. So Ibis, who made the Ripley and the Ripmo, are really famous because they're like one of the OG mountain bike brands. Scott Nicol welded and worked with some of the originators and went to loads of really early Clunker Classic races. They were always cheeky. They did a very cheeky Christmas card one year. They did some amusingly named special butting on tubing, which is called Moron, because it had more on the ends. But where does the name Ripley come from for that model? Let us know.
Okay, last week we were talking about one bike to rule them all, and is that a trail bike or does that bike even exist?
Yeah.
And our comments, one from David Tomasetti says, my do-it-all bike is ironically my Specialized Turbo Levo, which is a trail bike. No, it's an e-bike. It's the e-bike trail bike. It can handle everything from any mounted trail I ever ride to bombing through the local city streets, all the while keeping a giant smile on my face. Well, yeah, I guess it is doing it all, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is the key, is smiles per hour.
Smiles.
Noel Bodle, I'm probably butchering your name, I do apologise. He's got a transition spur, which he loves the versatility. It's got to be the closest that he's ever had to a do-it-all bike. Pretty light carbon wheels, it just flies, it's really capable. And just to clarify, this is a 120mm 29er, and he reckons it's all you need in the UK. I have heard that bike is very good, so yeah, interesting.
Well, Dat Penguin 97 reckons that a do-it-all bike is one of those big old gravity-oriented do-it-all bikes that he can change up to ride in either park or trail.
Interesting. And yeah, another person who's after the big travel bikes is Clinton Sylvie. He'd love a 24-pound bike, that in weight, but with 170mm of travel. So lightweight, big travel, with no pedal bob, and it wouldn't break. That's what he wants. I think that sounds perfect. Whether it exists is another question.
Well, Johnny Pennell says one bike can do it all, just not be the fastest at everything. I think that's a really good point to end on, really.
Yeah.
Of course, everything can do everything, but it's whether you're specialising or not.
Yeah.
So what have we got coming up this weekend, Owen? Because I think it's another double Owen weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, for better or worse. We've got hydration pack hacks. So that is all about keeping a hydration pack or bottle fresh, so you don't get some kind of nasty lurgy, which is always helpful. And also the always title fight of any sort of, well, trailhead or post-trail beer, carbon versus alloy. Which is it going to be?
Frames or wheels we're talking
We're
here?
just talking frames.
Just talking frames.
Yeah.
All right, nice. And if you want to debate some more tech, then don't forget to jump into the comments right now and let us know what you think about prototypes being used in downhill. Do you care? Do you think they're an advantage? Let us know down in the comments below.